Hi, boys and girls. All right, this is my first instructional via video, so hopefully you guys are going to give me some grace. If it is awful, please let me know, okay? So this is going to be to make our egg tempera. I'm going to try and go through this pretty fast because I don't want to take up a ton of time with the video. But I also want to go slow enough that you can hit pause, do the step, and then hit continue, okay? Now, hopefully you've got a print that's with you. That's going to be important for this one because we are going to use a butter knife. And also this can get a little bit messy for some of our younger students. So parents, it is okay to let them try this. Promise you guys are going to have fun doing this. And I bet you'll even be surprised that you can make paint from eggs. Okay, so give me a second. I'm going to tip our little video screen down, and then I've got to flip the screen back. And if you were in class with me during the year, you know there were times Miss H had to sit there and keep playing with the video head. Okay, so let me get a few of these things out of this screenshot here. So I've got some examples here. And just so this is a little better, we're going to work with this. Okay, so here I have already made some of these so that you didn't have to sit here for 30 minutes watching me do this. Now these colors, as you can see here, I have not adjusted the setting on the video. You will get colors that are this vibrant. I'm going to show you how I got this red to be a little bit more red. In total, this entire project cost me $4 at Dollar Tree. I got a box of food color. You could opt to just use food color. It will work great with just food color. But thankfully, because we're at that Easter time, parents, these were the best investment possible because as you can see, I barely shaved off the top. You've got tons of chalk for the summer for the kids to play with. Great dollar investment. So here's what this looked like, guys. What I did is I had taken the egg, I had set it in the little cup here. I'm using a muffin tin because it is large enough to catch the shavings. I really didn't make that much of a mess, and as you can tell as you watch me here, as I brush the butter knife here, and actually I really like these chunky chalks. The bigger you can get them, parents, the better, because it is a lot easier to mix this paint if you have little shreds. That's why we're using the butter knife, because it is going to shave little tiny granules into our muffin tin, and you don't really have to do this that hard, okay? If you were to just gently graze this, it'll take a little bit of time, and that is why I suggest making the 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, because, and I bet I have a ton of kids right now that are telling you why, if we start with our primary colors, we are able to then mix our secondary colors. And I hope you're going to help me, guys. Secondary color made with red and yellow is, that's right, it is orange. And the secondary color made with yellow and blue, you've already got it on the screen. These two are going to make green, that's right. And of course, our red and our blue are going to make our last color purple, that is right, or violet for some of those that are remembering. Miss H was teaching us the correct verbiage for our colors when we talk about the hues. When we left, guys, we were talking about our colors. You can share with your mom or dad things that you learned about the color wheel. We learned about color mixing. My 4th, 5th, and 3rd graders had learned about tertiary colors. That is our 3rd set of colors. So if I was to take my yellow and blue, combine them with equal equal parts to make my green, I then could mix that green again with one of the parent hues. So if I mixed green with yellow, I would have tertiary color, yellow, green. Tertiary colors are always 2 words, and they will always tell you what primary color it has more of in it because it's going to be the first word. So if I have yellow, green, it means that I made green and then I mixed some more yellow. Now for some of those that remember that I said this is a math equation, okay? We're gonna focus on the tempera paint, but just to take a little side note here, because parents, there are tons of ways during this time that you can talk to your children about math without ever talking about the word math. Miss H has been fooling them this entire year. Whether they realize it or not, I've been teaching them math through color. So if I was to take 2 parts yellow and 1 part blue, I would get yellow-green. Or if I was to mix equal parts yellow and blue together to make green, I then would take that same green, mix it with 1 more part yellow to get that yellow-green, or 1 more part blue to get that blue-green. Color, I love color. It's one of my favorite subjects in art because color talks about every single dynamic of learning, okay? But that's for another lesson. So now, I've got in this tin here enough chalk to make our blue. Now I am going to get this red off of my spoon because I don't want to waste any paint. I hope your kids can tell you Miss H does not waste supplies. I can guarantee you every time they were in my room, they were talked to about being a responsible artist. So parents, use Miss H's terminology. Remind your kids that we are responsible artists. We don't waste our resources. We don't waste our paint. We always keep our space clean. And if we perchance make a teeny tiny accident and get a little paint somewhere, we make sure we stop what we're doing and we clean it up right away. Parents, I encourage you that if you're helping your kids with these lessons throughout our distance learning, I encourage you to speak to them in those terms. Speak to them in the terms that I've spoken to them all year as being responsible artists. We're stewards of our supplies because as your children could tell you whether they like it or not, that every time we talked about being stewards of our supplies, I also talked to them about making sure that they take that home with them and that they understand to be stewards of the things their parents buy them. So parents, I encourage you to talk to your kids in the terms that Miss H talks to them in. So now my friend in 3rd grade, Miss Lily, she actually asked a great question on Canvas. And I'm so happy she asked that question before we got to this video. She asked me, Miss H, what happens if my parents don't want to use eggs? And I understand that. We are in a pandemic. There are supplies that I understand that we may not be able to get a hold of. Parents, there is no indictment for you to have to do these lessons with your kids and buy the supplies. If it were up to me, I would deliver supplies to every student. I love your kids. I loved doing art with them, and I look so forward to next year, all of our art projects. But parents, if you did not want to waste eggs, here's a couple options. You can, 1, use half an egg for each color. Just use a little bit. Let your child play with making their own paint. Make the paint, use the paint, and then we won't make any more paint. We could use another, either an additional paint, something you have at home pre-made, or maybe markers or crayons. But I encourage you parents, if cutting up a bunch of eggs is not something that you would like to do, there's no shame in that. There is no reason that you have to use eggs for an art project if you don't want to. And kids, we're going to respect our parents if perchance that's the situation, because it's much better to use the supplies like eggs for eating rather than for painting, okay? So I just want to say that up front, that it is okay if a parent, guys, does not want to use eggs. We're not going to argue. We're not going to throw a fit. okay? We get what we get and we don't throw a fit, okay? So if your parent allows you to use half an egg for each color, you are going to say it with me, thank you. Thank you for letting me try the art project, Mom or Dad. Thank you. That is our attitude, okay? So you can use one egg. I've used one egg here. I've created quite a bit of paint with my one egg. So I'm going to try and get this to, so you can see, I didn't have to do a whole lot with this, okay? So, and just to give you a comparison, frame of reference, this purple egg chalk, that was what it looked like. As you can tell, I didn't really have to break it down too much, okay, to get that amount. Oops, I got some blue in there. We'll get that out in a moment. But, so I used one egg here. You're going to see what happens with that one egg when I begin to mix it, okay? So now, here's some suggestions. Parents, all we need is the egg yolk. So that's why I had cracked all my eggs first into a little container that I could put a cover over, okay? So I plan on eating these egg whites in the morning, okay? So these will not go to waste. We're not going to waste the eggs. We only need the egg yolk. Egg yolk is the binder. As you read through how Giotto and Michelangelo made different tempera paints in the Middle Ages, back when medieval artists were creating their frescoes, these paintings that were on wood panels, okay? They needed paint that was going to endure some years, some exposure, okay? So egg was a great binder. Once it hardened, it bound, it stuck. Parents, you that bake cakes or make casseroles, you know that egg is a fantastic binder. It means that it's sticky. When you put it into something, it's going to grab hold of it, kids. All right? So now what I've done is I've put my whole egg. We could have cut this egg in half, okay? We would have wanted to do that before we put it in here. And we actually would have wanted to take that egg and put it in another little container to cut it in half. Because once you cut the egg yolk in half, as you all can see it here, it's starting to spread, okay? So very quickly, I'm going to mix this up. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Miss H, wait a second. That egg yolk is yellow, and you put it in some blue chalk. Isn't it going to turn green? Oh, my astute little artist. Yes, it will. But because I had more blue than yellow, some of my students are probably saying, oh, Miss H, that means you're going to make a version of blue green. And as you can see, and I'm looking at it on the video right now, the video is actually showing it looking pretty blue. Okay, let's see if I can't get a little more light on the situation. But if you were sitting here with me right now, you would see that it is still a slight tinge of a blue-green. Well, you might be not quite as, I'm looking for a good word to use. Let's say OCD. Let's just use the word that I am about having correct hues for color, okay? Not a worry. Here is what the food coloring is for. So parents, if you did not want to buy chalk and food coloring, and believe me, I know that there are a lot better things that $1 can be spent on. You're talking to your girl right here, Miss Frugality, okay? So we could have taken an egg yolk and just used food coloring. And I apologize for not having one prepared that I could have shown you what that looked like. But if you want to experiment with that at home, you would just put the egg yolk in our tin, put some food coloring in it. Promise you, you're going to get a version of paint. It's going to be a little thinner. That's why I like the chalk and suggested the chalk, because I will tell you, as you could see, it's going to turn a great color. You didn't even need the food coloring. The chalk, though, is going to add some viscosity to it. Uh-oh, vocabulary word. Viscosity In painting, viscosity, when you're talking about liquids, is the thickness. You're going to hear the word viscosity a lot when you get to science, and especially as we get older and we start getting into chemistry classes. But if you are bold enough to take color theory when you get to college, which, oh, Miss H would love it if all of you did, because it'd be probably the most beneficial class you could take for any degree, any field at all. You've heard me say it a million times. If you are good at color, you could be a millionaire making video games. You could be a clothing designer. You could be an architect. You could be anything you want to be, an advertiser. You could be the guy who's guiding the $1 million entrepreneur on how to build his buildings. Color matters. We live in a world of color. Color is the most important thing that you could understand in art. If you understand the principles of color, both psychologically and physically, you will do very, very well in any field that you go into. I can promise you that. So I have mixed together my blue here. And parents, just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to show you, because this is still pretty thin, I'm going to put a little blue over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of red. Add 4 or 5 drops and just see where that gets us. Just so you could see what would happen had you mixed the food coloring to it. I know it's not going to be exactly like it will look, but it will give you a good idea that still, even though it's a little bit thinner, or that it will be a little bit thinner, that you can still, for the purposes of this exercise, get a great paint. Okay, so now for the time constraint for my video, okay, I want to make sure to show you now what we do in our painting, okay? So, and if you have questions, if there's something that I flew by and maybe I am not realizing that I didn't answer, okay, then I want you to send me an email, put a comment, do something, ask that question. I want to know so that I can make this better together, okay? I'm going to mix my paint up a little bit here. I had made that yellow earlier. This yellow is a beautiful color. Very nice, rich yellow color. I was actually very surprised because I've never made the egg tempera. I knew how to make it. I'd never really made it. I've always been a great steward of paint by knowing how to mix color, so I only ever buy my primary colors. Kids, you remember that conversation we had? You can buy much more expensive paints when you've only got to buy your red, yellow, blue, and your white pigment and your black pigment. You can make any color known to man by those 5 pigments. Red, yellow, blue are our primaries. White and black create every tint with white, every shade with black, and when we combine them and make gray, every tone. So I have not drawn anything on my paper here, okay? That's what I want to see from you guys, okay? So our assignment was to create, and I'm going to just turn this over, to create a piece of art similar to the medieval artists. They were commissioned to create artwork that was usually going to be in a church or some sort of public memoriam. It greatly centered around religion because that was predominantly one of the biggest influencers of art during that time period. But also, as we learned about Giotto, it was also an art period that really focused on expressions of humanity. Now, Giotto took it one step further where he was actually drawing still lifes. He is one of the grandfathers to Western art, fathers, not grandfathers, fathers to Western art, because he really was the first artist to focus on drawing things from life, to give it not only human expression, but now also some of the traits and expressive features that you could see on a human. So I'm going to start with the color red, okay? And I just want to show you how this will spread across your paper, okay? So if you could see, and I'm going to zoom in here. Let's see if I can do that. Yep, there we go. So if you could sit here and watch me pull my brush bristles across my paper, that egg is giving it a slight sticky feel. And that means that our paint is going to have a very strong bond to our paper, okay? So this egg tempera that we've created is going to be a little bit thicker than the tempera paint we're used to in class. I'm going to take a little bit of yellow paint and I'm just going to paint over some of this red. Now you're going to notice that my yellow didn't quite go on as strong as my red. Now we all know, and your student sitting next to you, I hope, remembers, how many times did I said that when we mix colors, we always start with the lightest color. Now, I did not start with the lightest color because I wanted to show you the difference between these two hues that we've created. So we call a color, okay? Now this yellow is very thin. So students, you are going to have to make sure that if the color that you want to use is going to involve yellow, so that means the color yellow or blue or green, remember that that is a thinner color, okay? So that means it is going to have less opacity. Oh no, another vocabulary word. We talked about viscosity. That's the thickness of a medium. Medium that we're using is our, oops, I'm gonna zoom out, is our paint. That's our medium. But opacity for color, and especially in painting, or graphic designers understand this word, that it means how well we can see through it or how little we can see through it. That's the best way I can describe it. That might sound like transparency to you, but when we apply that word opacity or opaque, I probably pronounce it incorrectly. I'm sure there's some people who are yelling at their screen right now. Forgive me, I'm from Wisconsin. But the opaqueness of a color, if it has if it's highly opaque or has a high opacity, that means that it has has more saturation in the hue. Okay, that's another vocab word that we learned. So right now, all I'm doing is I'm just playing with the paint, color mixing. Students, remember that we take care of our paintbrush by making sure that we are gently stroking the paintbrush in one direction. You'll notice that I keep picking up my paintbrush and I move in one direction at a time. I don't do this. Remember all the times I showed you that? That destroys brush bristles. And it also does not create a nice, smooth, fluid surface, okay? So students, just because we're at home, it does not mean that you get to throw out all the ways that we learned how to paint. I really like this blue color that we've created here. And especially as I put it on top of this yellow, that is making a beautiful blue-green. My blue is still a tad bit on the blue-green side. I didn't quite get all of that blue-green out of it. So adding into that yellow has just made that more apparent, okay? Now, as I put this over this little bit of yellow and red that I've created, which is orange, you're noticing what happens when two colors that are across from the color wheel come together. They neutralize. Brown is not a color. Sorry, and if there's any art stewards out there, I hope you would not want to debate me on that. But color comes from light. All color is created from light. So if it cannot be found in the 7 wavelengths of light, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. It cannot be called color. Now we call brown a color thanks to Crayola and other folks that give brown the name color because it's just easier when we call it a color. I agree. I'm not going to fight them on that. But what happens when two colors across from the color wheel come together, they neutralize. So if I was to take, and oops, excuse me, my students would have just said, wait, Miss H, you made yellow and you made purple. And when we were in our color class, you always told us that purple and yellow made the best brown. Now my brown, if I just use the purple that I had created, and let's just zoom in on this. My brown is going to have a little bit of a cold feel, meaning that there's quite a bit of blue in that purple. So if I simply put another layer of yellow over it, I'll get a warmer brown. Could add a tiny bit of red to it if I wanted to. Or I can just continue to layer some yellow. So if you were painting like a medieval artist and you had created these paints, can you imagine every time that Giotto or Michelangelo used these lighter colors? If you were to go back to those videos and study those ceiling frescoes, those ceiling paintings, now that we've experienced what it was like to put these colors on our paper, can you imagine now how long it would have taken for Giotto or Michelangelo to get their yellows to be bright or to be very bold, to have high saturation? Our red was easy. We were able to just lay that red there and we could see that easily. But our yellow, we would have to make a lot of yellow. We'd have to lay it on very thick. We'd have to let it dry and then create another layer of yellow over it or come back to that spot. Remember, we learned that Michelangelo had to make his own scaffold. And I'm going to turn this back up here because I am done down there. Ooh, but you guys right now are laughing at my in-technability right here. But as you remember from the video, guys, that Michelangelo, he had created a scaffold and he had to lay on his back. He could only paint a little section at a time, and then he had to climb all the way down, scoot this thing over, climb all the way up. Can you imagine trying to create something with that much effort? Must have been pretty important. Guy got commissioned for a lot of money, right? We'll never know. But my guess is that, and I'm probably right on this, knowing the life and the legacy and the philosophy of Michelangelo, that painting meant something to him. Because he could have just taken the easy way out, remember? He could have just painted the 12 disciples like the Pope had wanted him to. He wanted something that would forever captivate humanity. It would transcend time, and it would be something that every single person that saw it from the day that it was unveiled to current day, today. If we weren't on a lockdown, you would see people at the Vatican, touring the Vatican, looking at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in awe of what Michelangelo had created. He wanted something that was going to give that awe that religion was meant to evoke. That's what art did during that time period. So this piece of art that you're creating, I want you to stop and think about that. Think about all the work that Michelangelo would have had to go, to do, all the challenges he would have had to overcome just to create this piece of art. It meant something to him. So whatever you decide to create, it doesn't have to be complex, but make it something that means something to you. What does religion mean to you? That's what I had, that was my prompting question. What did it mean? What does it mean to other people? What did it mean to people back then? If you were an artist creating something the same time that Giotto had created the ceiling on the arena, I want you to think about that. Go back to the video. Look at the ceiling of the Padova. Look at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Get inspired. It could be a view like Michelangelo, you were looking up into the heavens. So it was as if somebody tore the ceiling off of the Sistine Chapel and you are looking up at heaven itself. Your painting, maybe you want to put your painting on the bottom of a table. I do admit that's something we didn't get to do that we would have done for this exercise. We would have created our own paint. And then you guys would have laid on your backs and we would have put paper on the tables, on the bottom of the tables, and we would have created a ceiling piece of art. So hopefully we don't have another pandemic next year and we get to do that lesson in its totality. But my little artists, I hope that you've created your paint. And remember, if your parents said they did not want to waste eggs for paint, you are not going to throw a fit, but you are not going to quit. Find something else that you can create your piece of art with. Do you have crayons? Do you have markers? Do you have your own paint? Do you have a pencil? I will take a pencil drawing, okay? I just want to see your art. You know, more than anything, it's not about you doing it the way that I show you to do it. Sometimes it is, if in the event it was going to get a monster mess at the end of the day. But I want to see your art. I want to see what it means to you. And parents, this is your opportunity to teach your kids something about art. I'm not just the artist here, you are too, okay? So help your children engage in what it means to create a piece of art centered around a theme like religion. That happens to be the theme here because we're mirroring the medieval artists and what would have influenced the art of that time period. What was it like to create something heavily influenced by something that was a social focus? We could think of a lot of things right now that would fit that. I could introduce you to a ton of artists that are creating their art centered around what is socially influencing people today. And you can name a lot of issues. I could too. So have that conversation with your kids. It is okay to have that conversation. It might not be an easy one. In this first year, I've had to grapple a lot of hard conversations. When we talked about Day of the Dead, that was a hard one for me, but I was taken back by how some of the kids were so well versed in how to properly talk about its expression of appreciation for life, the celebration of people around them. And so it wasn't something confused with Halloween. It wasn't something that was all the way sad. It was something that they understood as an expression of appreciation and love and gratitude. Well, this is an opportunity for us to have that conversation around this piece of art. So I've said all I'm going to say. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know that this is stretched past 20 minutes. I'm going to try and dial it down. I'm just so excited to get to teach an art lesson. So feel free. I'm not going to be mad if you've sped past things or you've gone burp, burp, and stopped it like 20 minutes ago, okay? So guys, I look forward to our next lesson and get ready to do some abstracting after this, all right? Look forward to talking to you and definitely look forward to seeing your art. All right, mwah, miss you guys.